Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. I was stunned when David opened the door and walked in on Brandon and me in a compromising situation at the Comfort Inn on Highway 35. At first, it seemed like Brandon didn't realize David was there. He was focused on me, lost in the moment. But I managed to push him away quickly. In the months that followed, I came to understand that Brandon had been so wrapped up in our relationship that he acted without considering the consequences. He must have suspected that David wouldn't confront him after everything that had happened between us during our Caribbean cruise. I was speechless, finally finding the words, "David, what are you doing here?" I can explain everything. I felt foolish for my response. The look on David's face showed the hurt I had caused him, a pain I didn't fully grasp at that moment. All he said was, "Don't bother coming home, Sarah. You can have your divorce. You two can have each other for all I care, just like you did on the ship." My mind raced with confusion. How could the man I'd loved for 15 years say that to me? Brandon meant something to me, but it was nothing compared to the love I had for David. I had never intended for things to go this far with Brandon. It had started as a distraction during a difficult time in our marriage. Then I remembered David's words, "You can have your divorce. You win." What was he talking about? I had never considered divorcing him. He must have been angry and hurt. As David stormed out, a wave of realization hit me. He knew about our time on the cruise. We had been careful, but somehow he had figured it out. I always returned to our cabin after spending time with Brandon each night, but David was usually asleep. I didn't want to wake him up, especially since he had been feeling so unwell from seasickness. I longed to chase after David in the parking lot to explain myself. I would have run out there in my bathrobe if it meant catching him. If I could have just caught up to him, I would have told him how much I loved him. But Brandon grabbed my wrist and pulled me back, insisting that we could have a few more minutes together. He argued that if David had known for a while and suspected what we had been doing every day on the cruise, then he couldn't have meant what he said about not wanting me back. In fact, Brandon claimed that the thought of our relationship excited David. "Some husbands are like that," he said, trying to convince me that David wouldn't be hurt by my actions. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I tried to push thoughts of David out of my mind as Brandon held me close, and I lost myself in the moment. Time seemed to slip away as I focused on Brandon, who seemed to have endless energy. Later, as I reflected on everything, I realized I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, torn between the thrill of the present and the reality I was leaving behind. I had time later to think about my last encounter with Brandon. I suspected it was likely just a fleeting connection. The next thing I knew, David opened the door again. I wished we had locked it. My 4 children came rushing in, and the door slammed shut behind them. David didn't follow, but why would he send our children in when he knew I was with Brandon? If he was okay with what I was doing, why would he do that? Something felt off about what Brandon had said. My children stopped and stared, and just as I felt the weight of their gaze, Madison, my oldest at 15, broke the silence. "Mom, that's disgusting," she exclaimed. No wonder Dad was upset. I felt a rush of humiliation wash over me as her words sank in. With Brandon no longer beside me, I could fully see my children's shocked faces, and I suddenly felt so exposed and ashamed. I raised my arms in a futile attempt to cover my embarrassment, but they just stood there, frozen. Realizing how I must appear to them only deepened my sense of shame. I quickly covered myself with the sheet from the bed as Madison ushered her siblings outside. I got off the bed and hurried to the bathroom to clean up. As the water cascaded over me, I recalled everything David had said when he walked in earlier. I knew I had to find him and tell him that he was the only man I truly loved. I said a quick goodbye to Brandon and felt even worse when he laughed as I grabbed my overnight bag that David had thrown into the room. I left knowing what I had done was wrong, feeling completely used. The sound of the door slamming behind me felt symbolic, but I didn't fully grasp its weight at the time. Standing in the motel parking lot, I looked around hoping David was still there waiting for me. Tears filled my eyes when I realized he was nowhere to be seen. I could hear my children crying in our Honda Pilot, waiting for me to take them home. I couldn't bring myself to look at them, knowing what they had seen. The memory of their expressions, a mixture of horror and disappointment, burned in my mind. Madison's voice broke through my thoughts as she cried out, "We hate it here, and we hate you. We want to go home." My heart raced as the reality of my actions hit me. I put my bag in the back of the SUV, struggling to start the engine with my shaking hands. Finally, we drove off toward our subdivision in Westerville, my children still sobbing and refusing to speak to me. Even Connor and Kyle, the 8-year-old twins, seemed to understand how deeply I had let them down. I longed to explain my actions, to make them understand, but they remained silent, ignoring me completely. My thoughts drifted back to how everything had unraveled. We had finally saved enough for our dream cruise, a trip we had talked about for years. David worked as a senior project manager at a construction engineering firm, and I managed our household budget carefully. But every time we got close to affording the vacation, some unexpected expense would arise. The furnace would break, or one of the kids would need emergency dental work. Finally, our chance had come, and we set off for our 7-day Caribbean cruise from Fort Lauderdale. But it hadn't gone as planned. David was violently seasick every day and night from the moment we left port and stayed in our cabin until the morning we disembarked. I had dreamed for years of dancing the night away on a cruise ship, so when the opportunity arose, I decided to go by myself. This is something I truly regretted later. I received plenty of offers to dance with various men around me, and then I met a charming man from Atlanta. It felt romantic as we strolled under the moonlight on the deck, holding each other closely. When he kissed me near the pool deck, I momentarily forgot about David waiting in our cabin. Before I knew it, I had crossed a line that I couldn't take back. I told myself it was just a holiday fling and that I would make it up to David when we returned home to Ohio. But that didn't happen. I loved David dearly, but I also felt resentment toward him for his illness. We hadn't been intimate since I got pregnant with the twins, and I was uncomfortable with any kind of physical affection. My guilt compounded my feelings, making everything worse. When I found myself longing for closeness, I would freeze up and push him away, fearful of having more children. Once we returned home to our 4-bedroom colonial in Westerville, I tried to reconnect with him every night, but my guilt over my indiscretions made me feel sick, leading me to withdraw even more. David missed out on so much during that time. He never seemed the same after we arrived home. There was a sadness in his eyes that I had never seen before. His mood shifted quickly, and the easygoing husband I had known was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that he somehow sensed my betrayal and was struggling to cope with it. David's words in the motel confirmed my fears. He knew about my affair during the cruise. I wondered why he hadn't stopped me if he was aware of what was happening. It felt so freeing to connect with someone after years of feeling alone, but I couldn't bring myself to be close to the man who meant so much to me. The afternoon I met Brandon had been unexpected. I was at home doing laundry when my cell phone rang, and it was him. "Sarah, I'm in Columbus on business for the day, and I want to drop by to give you a special birthday present." I hesitated, refusing to let him come to our house in case the neighbors in our subdivision noticed and told David. A part of me wondered what would happen if I saw him again, and maybe I wanted it to happen. As much as I loved David, I missed the thrill I felt with Brandon. "I'll meet you at your hotel in 30 minutes, I replied. "I can't stay long. We usually have a special dinner for my birthday." As I left our neighborhood, I felt a mix of dread and excitement, sealing my fate. When I arrived at the Comfort Inn, I found Brandon waiting for me in room 237. My mind screamed for me to stop, but my desire had taken over. In that moment, I felt swept away, forgetting about David once more. I was overwhelmed with guilt and fear, worried about the consequences of my actions. I prayed it wouldn't cost me my marriage. I recalled a day on the cruise when Brandon and I had been joking around after spending time together on the Lido deck. For some reason, we started discussing marriage and divorce. I had made a comment about how nice it would be if we were both free to live together and enjoy each other's company. We both knew we didn't mean it. It was just a cruise romance, and we would likely never see each other again. Surrounded by so many people, I felt a sense of freedom, not caring if they overheard us. I actually felt a little mischievous knowing they were aware of our connection. The journey home to Columbus seemed to stretch endlessly, and when we finally arrived, I rushed inside to find David, the man I needed to hold. I ran to our master bedroom and breathed a sigh of relief when I saw that all of David's clothes and toiletries were still there. He hadn't left me, and I still had a chance to save my marriage. I fed the children, helped them with their baths, and made sure they finished their homework before bedtime. They all refused to kiss me goodnight, crying and calling for their father. I kept assuring them he would be home soon. Unfortunately, our special birthday dinner, David's favorite pot roast, was ruined as it dried out in the oven while I waited in the living room for him. As the night wore on, I felt a desperate need to tell him how much I truly loved him and how important he was to me. It had been years since I had expressed that to him. I tried calling his iPhone every few minutes since I got home, but it went straight to voicemail each time. Connor, one of my twins, woke me in the morning to remind me to pack his school lunch. As he ate his Cheerios, I realized I had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for David. Nightmares had plagued my sleep, filled with images of David looking pale and sorrowful. The sadness in his sunken eyes haunted me. I desperately wanted to reach out and touch him, but it felt like my hand passed right through him. In a panic, I rushed to our bedroom, only to find everything just as I had left it. David was still missing, and I grew increasingly worried about him. In all our 15 years together, the only times we had spent apart were when I was having our children at Riverside Methodist Hospital. Madison glared at me whenever I got near her, but I finally managed to get all the kids into the SUV and off to their elementary and middle schools. Returning home to our quiet subdivision, I waited for David, but he didn't show up. I needed to explain to him that Brandon meant nothing to me and that I loved him more than anything in the world. My life felt meaningless without him. I decided to call his workplace at Henderson Construction, where I learned he had taken Thursday off to surprise me for my birthday. His project coordinator, Janet, asked if we had a good time, and I couldn't help but think about how he had surprised me indeed. Before I could ask to speak with him, she informed me he hadn't come in Friday and asked if he was sick. I was shocked. David never missed a day of work. He was their most reliable senior project manager. I lied, saying he had been ill all night and I would have him call when he returned from the doctor. When Janet inquired about my call, I explained he had asked me to inform them of his appointment, and I had forgotten to do it earlier. I contacted my parents in nearby Dublin and other family members to see if they had seen or heard from him. I told them we had a small disagreement and that he hadn't come home. I was so worried about him. No one had seen or heard from him, but they promised to let me know if they did. Our closest friends from the neighborhood confided that David had organized a belated birthday party for me, combined with our anniversary celebration on Saturday, and had invited everyone from our street and his work. I realized I would see him then, and maybe he was just taking some time away to clear his head after what had happened with Brandon. I convinced myself that Brandon must have been right about David, that he enjoyed seeing me with someone else. Yet I still longed for David and wanted to hold him. A terrible feeling of complete loss washed over me. It was a void I had never felt before. Friday felt like the longest day of my life, and Friday night was even worse as I waited up for him again, wandering around our house aimlessly. I discovered everything he had organized for the party, neatly stored in our basement. He hadn't forgotten anything, even remembering to order his favorite Diet Coke from Kroger. I knew he would be home soon, and I was eager to reconnect with him after so many years of distance. When Saturday arrived, I had everything prepared for the party in our backyard. Our friends arrived with their children, and my own kids finally emerged from their rooms eager to play. However, they still refused to acknowledge me. I overheard my sister-in-law Beth asking little Emma, our 6-year-old, if David had been home yet. The twins replied in unison, "Daddy came to see us the last 2 nights while Mommy was asleep. He said he would always be there to keep an eye on us." Beth replied, "That's good. Does your mommy know?" They both shook their heads, and she walked away to join the other adults by our pool. It became clear to me that David had been home each night to see the kids, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Maybe he had moved out to a hotel. I was becoming increasingly worried about David again, and I felt a wave of anger that he hadn't shown up for the party he had organized for me. I wanted to hold him so badly, to tell him how much I missed him and that I truly loved him. I wished for a chance to make everything right between us, even though I had a lot to atone for after years of denying him affection. As I was busy with some guests near our kitchen island, the doorbell rang. My dad went to answer it but didn't come back. A few minutes later, my mother went to find him, thinking he might have fallen asleep on our sectional sofa. When she didn't return either, I went to check on them, assuming they were having a small disagreement. As I entered the living room, I was taken aback to see both my parents sitting on the couch in tears, with 2 Delaware County Sheriff's deputies standing beside them. They all looked up when I walked in, and one of the officers suggested my mother make some coffee. As I approached them, one of the deputies was looking at a photo, one that seemed to resemble the one of me that David kept in his wallet. "Are you Sarah Elizabeth Thompson?" he asked. My heart raced as I replied, "Yes, I am. Is David hurt? Is he all right?" My mother burst into tears and rushed into the kitchen, and I could hear her fumbling with our Keurig machine. My father stood up, put his arm around my shoulders, and sat beside me. The deputy's voice trembled as he said, "Mrs. Thompson, we're so sorry, but we have to inform you that your husband is dead." I sat there stunned, unable to breathe. Friends and family were gathering at the archway into the kitchen, their expressions shocked and somber as they silently spilled into the room, clutching their partners tightly. There was a heavy silence, broken only by the sounds of muffled sobs. The deputy continued, "He left a note for us and a private letter for you. We had to open your letter. I hope you understand. It's very personal and explains his reasons for what he has done. It appears he took his own life late Thursday afternoon. His vehicle was well concealed in Alum Creek State Park and wasn't discovered until a few hours ago by some hikers. I'm so sorry. We'll need a family member or close friend to follow us to the Franklin County Coroner's office to identify his body. Or if you feel up to it, it's really just a formality at this point." I watched as David's brother Tom stepped forward. "I'm his brother. I'll do it. Our parents passed away 5 years ago, and I'm the oldest sibling. It's the least I can do for him." The deputy looked at me silently, asking for my consent. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing David lying there lifeless. I knew I wanted to remember him alive, so I nodded slowly. As I did, everything seemed to blur, and I felt myself leaning forward, collapsing to the floor. I woke sometime later in my bed, hoping it had all been a nightmare. My parents were in the room sitting beside me. I remembered the deputy's words, David was dead. It didn't seem possible. The boys had said he visited them on Thursday and Friday nights. I turned to my father, who was holding the letter David had written to me. It was meant to be private, but he had clearly read it. He shook his head at me, tears streaming down his face. I had never seen my dad cry before. "Where are my children?" I exclaimed, suddenly alert. My mother handed me a cup of coffee and said, "They're with your brother Mike. They're understandably very upset and angry with you." We didn't realize until it was too late that the kids had walked in just as the police were telling you about David. They saw the patrol car outside and came in to find out what was happening. "Sarah, They're blaming you for David's death and are refusing to stay in the house or be anywhere near you. They even packed their bags before leaving with Mike. They said they're never coming back. You have to understand, we couldn't stop them. They told everyone at the party what they saw you doing on Thursday afternoon with your lover. We hoped against hope that they were making it up, but then we read David's letter, which confirmed everything they said. Sarah, how could you? The letter stated that I had completely shattered him when I betrayed his trust during the cruise. He had heard rumors that I was going to divorce him to live with my lover and take the children from him. As I thought about it, I couldn't help but cry. No one was supposed to know about Brandon and me. Now my life felt utterly destroyed. My God, where did David get the idea that I wanted to divorce him? I would never do that. I was finished with Brandon. All I wanted was my husband. Even now, I could see the disappointment in my mother's eyes. You have no idea how ashamed I am to call you my daughter. You did something terrible to someone who adored you. David loved you more than anything else in the world, and you crushed him, Sarah. You destroyed someone who loved you so deeply. Her words felt like daggers. I'm sorry, Sarah, but you were responsible for David taking his own life. You're also responsible for your children hating you now. I can't imagine what our neighbors will say when they hear you were at home celebrating your birthday and your wedding anniversary while your husband lay dead in a state park. Did you cheat on your wedding night too? David's death hurt me deeply. I had thought I was devoted to him, but I loved him. Why did he kill himself? I never wanted to hurt him. He wasn't supposed to find out. How did he know? I reached for the letter from my father's hands, my mother's accusations ringing in my ears. As I read David's words, tears streamed down my face. My dearest Sarah, please don't forget me. I loved you with all my heart and soul, more than life itself. I can't believe my love wasn't enough for you. Words will never express how hurt I was to discover that you no longer loved me. These past few years have been terribly difficult as you drifted away from me. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. Without you, I am nothing. I cannot face another day without your love. I couldn't bear to face our neighbors, family, and friends, knowing you had chosen someone else. Why would you hurt me like this? I pledged my eternal love for you, and I'll be thinking of you and the love we once had as I take my final breath. I still love you so much. I always have since we first met at Ohio State all those wonderful years ago. I want you, but you keep pushing me away. Before our cruise, I told you I couldn't live without you, and now I can't face a life without your love. When I heard you say you would divorce me to be with him, I felt there was no point in my existence. My attorney advised that if you divorced me, I would likely lose the children as well. Living without you and our children would mean a slow, painful death for me. You've left me with no choice. I pray that you and the children will find happiness with Brandon. Please remind the children of me every so often and tell them I love them so much. Tell your parents I love them as if they were my own, and I would have missed them too. It's too late to wish we hadn't gone on the cruise. You had looked forward to it so much. Even though I knew I would be seasick, I wanted to make it a special time for us and reignite our love after the difficult 6 years we had faced. When I discovered you were willing to be with Brandon, starting the affair from the very first night of the cruise, it shattered me. One night was bad enough, but you continued to go back to him day after day, even on our anniversary. I hoped that allowing your affair to happen would resolve our issues and that you would love me again, so I didn't stop you. I prayed I could eventually move past the unbelievable pain and hurt you caused me, that I could forgive you. I wanted to believe this was just a fleeting romance and that once we returned home, our lives would return to normal. But they didn't. After you were with him, you treated me like a stranger when we got home and refused even the simplest expressions of affection. That afternoon when you were with him again, it became painfully clear that you no longer felt anything for me. I couldn't confront you during the cruise for fear of pushing you further away. I waited for you to leave him after I interrupted you, but you didn't. Standing by the door, it was obvious who you truly loved. You have no idea of the pain and humiliation I felt, knowing you were giving him the love that should have been mine. I thought I was stronger, but your actions finally broke me. They confirmed my worst fears, that you no longer wanted me in your life. I wanted to stop you from seeing him during the cruise, but even when you were with me in the cabin, your mind was elsewhere. I never imagined you would continue your relationship after we returned home. I hoped you'd quickly forget him, but finding you and Brandon together in that motel was the final blow. It made me realize that you had made your choice, and I had lost you forever. I can't live without you, Sarah. I know there's no longer a place for me in your heart. My life feels over now that I've lost you, and I can't go on knowing you love someone else. You've taken away my reason for living. I will love you forever. Your loving husband, David. Tears streamed down my face as I called out, David, I don't love anyone else. I'm so sorry. It was so romantic on the cruise. I never thought you'd find out. Please come back to me. But of course he couldn't. Turning to my father, I reached out for reassurance, desperate for his love. He looked at me for a moment, then shook his head slowly. With his head held low, he walked away from me and out of the room. Now that I was awake, my mother said we had to pick up the kids from my brother's house and take them home. Sarah, they have refused to stay here any longer. Your father is taking David's death very hard, and he's shocked at your actions. He feels uncomfortable about the whole situation and wants to go home as soon as possible. A few minutes later, I watched my parents drive off in their Buick to pick up my children. My house felt empty, the only sound being the ticking of the grandfather clock in our foyer. As I wandered aimlessly through our 4-bedroom home, the full realization of what I had done to my husband and family hit me. I was alone in my misery, with no one to talk to, no one to share my love or grief with. Even my parents and children had left me. A special bond with my father now felt severed, and all of our friends from the neighborhood had disappeared as well. I crumpled to the floor of our living room, crying out, No, David, no. It was only you I loved. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you knew. I didn't realize I was hurting you by not being with you. Oh God. I didn't think you'd find out. The funeral was held the following Friday at Grace Lutheran Church on High Street. David had a lovely service, and he was buried next to his parents at Green Lawn Cemetery. I never realized how popular he was. There was standing room only in the church, with people even outside on the steps. By then, everyone in our community must have known what I had done to him. During the service, Pastor Williams and my mother were the only ones who spoke to me before and after, and at the graveside. People came to say goodbye to David, but not to share their sorrow with me. It was particularly telling when my children sat with my parents in a separate pew away from me. No one sat with me, not even my own brothers and sisters. None of the mourners spoke to me. They avoided me as if I had the plague. I could feel their stares and hear their whispers about how I had betrayed and hurt the man who loved me so deeply. After the service, they only spoke to my parents, my children, and David's siblings. Not even my father or children would acknowledge me. I thought to myself, I am alone. My family and friends have left me. No one cares that I miss him too. Don't they know I am hurting and grieving as well? What have I done? When everything was finished, they wandered away in their groups, leaving me standing alone at the graveside, crying and trying to comprehend why David would have taken such a drastic step. How could he have thought I would leave him? No one tried to console me. No one was there for me. Even Pastor Williams seemed eager to leave, finding someone else to talk to as he quietly slipped away, avoiding any interaction with me. My mother mumbled something about needing to get the kids home to Dublin. I knew they were holding a reception for David at their house, and I hadn't been invited. The sun was setting, and I was still sitting as close to David's casket as I could when some cemetery workers approached to tell me it was closing time. They helped me to my feet and asked if anyone was with me. Looking around for someone to take care of me, I began to sob uncontrollably. At that moment, One of the workers realized I was alone and escorted me to my Honda. As I walked away, I saw a backhoe moving toward David's grave. Each shovelful of dirt seemed to push him further away from me. I sat in my car, watching the mound of earth until it grew too dark to see, staring into the darkness of my future without him. I woke the next morning still sitting in my car in the cemetery parking lot, realizing that no one had missed me. Lonely days turned into lonelier weeks. Eventually, I decided to email Brandon, as we hadn't communicated since my birthday. I told him about David's death and how I felt so alone and abandoned. His response shocked me. "Sarah, it was you who cheated, not me. As far as I'm concerned, you were there with his permission, and he got his kicks knowing what I was doing to you. If you didn't have his permission, then you destroyed your marriage and killed your husband. I have an open marriage, and my wife and I both play around a bit. I'm not interested that David has killed himself or that you're now alone. We had nothing in common except the cruise and that experience, and to be honest, it wasn't even that great. Don't contact me again." I remembered our time together, walking arm in arm under the Caribbean moonlight, and now this. I felt robbed of the love that should have been mine with David during the cruise, which had been our wedding anniversary as well as my birthday. I had been a complete fool. I cheated on the man I loved, who had loved me unconditionally for so long until he could take no more. Even in death, he still loved me. I realized my mistakes far too late. My life was destroyed, and the man I loved was gone, leaving me so lonely without him. Suddenly, I felt anger toward David for not being there to protect me. He should have stopped me. It was his fault too. Even though I spoke to my mother most days on the phone, it was over a month later before they brought my children around for a visit. Really just to pick up some of their clothes as the weather changed from summer to fall. My father still refused to have a real conversation with me and only tolerated my presence in the same room. How could he treat me like that? I had let myself go. I hadn't done any housework since the funeral, and I found no reason to shower regularly. In fact, I hardly slept in our king-size bed anymore, so I never bothered to change the sheets. When I did sleep there, I could still smell David's cologne on his pillow, which only made me cry. I tried to clean up the house after my parents called to say they were on their way, but they ended up staying overnight to help tidy up. My father went to the 24-hour Meijer to restock my pantry and freezer, as there was barely any food in the house. Just some stale crackers I nibbled on when I felt the urge. It was nice to have my children around again, but a few times I lost my temper over trivial things, and afterward they refused to talk to me. The next day, while my father drove my children to their schools, my mother took me to our family doctor, Dr. Peterson, at the medical center. I had lost some weight, but I knew there was nothing physically wrong with me. My mother insisted we wait since we didn't have an appointment, but Dr. Peterson saw us as soon as he could. We talked about David's death and my marriage before the cruise, including my actions during that time. I was honest, thinking I could convince him that there was nothing wrong with me. Dr. Peterson asked to see David's letter, but I hadn't brought it and didn't know my mother had made a copy. We discussed my weight loss and whether I was taking care of myself. The doctor expressed his sadness about David's death, saying he never exhibited signs of depression during his annual checkups. He suspected the pressure of living with someone who was struggling may have weighed heavily on David. Dr. Peterson mentioned that there are always counselors and organizations willing to help anyone who reaches a point where they consider taking their own life. He told me he had seen David a few months before our cruise to discuss my changing behavior and moods. He wished he had taken more time to help David address his problems rather than just discussing mine. I hadn't realized how deeply my issues affected him. The doctor shared that David had been allergic to motion sickness medication and knew he would feel unwell during the cruise but wanted to be with me because he loved me. He believed my struggles contributed to our marital issues long before the cruise, including the distance between us over the past 6 years. Afterward, Dr. Peterson wrote a prescription for some antidepressants and gave me a few samples, saying I might feel a bit nauseous for a few days but would eventually feel like my old self again. I did feel sick initially, but I soon realized it wasn't me who had needed the medication. Months passed before I could convince my children to return home, but there was no fun or laughter left in our house. I tried to make it up to them, but my mood swings led me to blame them for everything, and I feared our neighbors were growing weary of my outbursts echoing through our subdivision. For the first time since marrying David, I had to work to supplement our income. The only job I could find was as a cashier at the Kroger on State Route 23. Nearly 10 months had passed since David's death, and our anniversary as well as my birthday was fast approaching. I was incredibly lonely and missed him so much. While cleaning out his closet, I found his Canon digital camera and checked to see if any family photos were on the memory card. There were lovely pictures of the kids at various soccer games and school events, but then I stumbled across photos from the cruise. Images of Brandon and me together, kissing and holding hands as if we were newlyweds. To my shock, there were hundreds of photos, including some of more intimate moments between us. I was stunned, wondering how David had captured those moments when he had seemed so sick the entire time. It was clear he hadn't stayed in bed all the time. Why hadn't he stopped me if he knew what was happening? I felt dirty and ashamed. Reading David's letter again, I realized he hadn't stopped me because he was terrified of losing me. Yet in the end, I had lost him. It didn't seem fair that none of our friends from the neighborhood reached out to me, and I hadn't been invited to any gatherings since his death. I wondered if the wives were worried I would pursue their husbands. Whenever I called, the phone would ring endlessly, or if someone picked up, they would always say they were on their way out and promised to call me back. No one ever did. I even tried to organize a barbecue, but no one showed up except my parents. Even my kids went to the O'Connor's house next door. Finally, I felt desperate for company and someone to talk to. I decided to try Match.com and met Derek. He seemed nice at first, but he quickly became very possessive, spending hours parked outside our house in his pickup truck, convinced I was seeing other men. I initially thought he might have heard about David's death, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at my daughter Madison, who had just turned 15. It was clear we had different intentions. He was looking for a physical relationship, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I just wanted someone to be close to. After much soul-searching, I called Derek and told him it was over. I didn't want to see him again. I let my kids know, and they seemed happier without him in our lives. A week later, I returned home late from work after some much-needed overtime at Kroger, hoping the girls had started cooking dinner. As soon as I entered our house through the garage, I heard Madison screaming for help from upstairs. I rushed to her room and found Derek on top of her, about to assault her. She saw me and pleaded for help as he struck her, trying to stop her from fighting back. I tried to push him off her, but when that failed, I punched his arm. He just laughed at me. In a panic, I ran downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed David's favorite cast iron skillet from the stove, and returned to Madison's room. Derek noticed my return and, between breaths as he continued to hit Madison, he sneered, "You're next. This is your doing because you refused me. Now I'll have both of you." I couldn't let that happen. I swung the heavy skillet with all my might, hitting him on the back of the head. The blow jolted him, and Madison screamed. I swung again, hitting him in the same spot. He fell forward, landing heavily on top of Madison, who was screaming as blood covered her face and body from the gaping wound on his head. I pushed him off her and helped her up. Madison's face was badly bruised, and blood was streaming down her body. How could someone do this to her? I ran downstairs and called 911, explaining that my daughter had been attacked and that her assailant was still in the house. Madison followed me into the kitchen, furious. "It's all your fault. You killed my father and brought that monster into our home. I hate you. I wish you were dead. You're not our mother anymore." I could hardly comprehend her words as I frantically searched the house and found my other 3 children bound and gagged in the basement closet. As I was freeing them, I heard sirens approaching from every direction. The Delaware County Sheriff's deputies rushed in with their weapons drawn and helped untie the twins. Madison didn't even try to calm herself as she led them to her would-be attacker lying unconscious in her room. They checked for a pulse and informed us he was dead. Now I felt as if I had killed two men. One deserved it, and one didn't. I heard Madison telling the deputies. My mother caused all this. She killed our father, then brought him into our house. I hope she burns in hell for destroying our lives. I hate her. I'll never forgive her. The police arranged for our neighbors, the Johnsons, to look after my other 3 children until my parents could drive down from Dublin to pick them up. We rushed Madison to Riverside Methodist Hospital, where tests were performed and statements taken. My brief affair was having consequences I never could have imagined. Afterward, my parents took us to their home in Dublin, as my house was still full of crime scene investigators. The next morning, my mother offered to drive me back to Westerville, saying my presence was upsetting my children and my father. I was distraught, realizing he still couldn't forgive me for what had happened. At least my mother was still speaking to me, though barely. Madison and the others were vocal in their refusal to come home with me, insisting they wanted to stay with my parents forever. They all blamed me now for what had happened to their father and to Madison. They refused to stay with me or even talk to me again. There was no love in their eyes anymore, no hugs, no kisses goodbye. I felt utterly alone, as if I had lost everyone. Even my parents and siblings had distanced themselves from me. I was living a nightmare. Weeks passed, and my children refused to live with me, so I formalized my parents' temporary custody of all 4 of them and arranged for my child support payments to be directed to them. Gradually, all of their toys and clothes ended up at my parents' house in Dublin. I felt powerless as they wouldn't accept me as their mother any longer, and they didn't even acknowledge my existence. Madison's words echoed in my mind, telling me she wished I were dead. I had ruined everyone's lives. I kept thinking about a dream I had been having repeatedly. It felt so real, occurring every night lately. I would wake in a cold sweat, knowing it had only been a dream. In it, David had come into our bedroom while I was asleep, and I awoke to his familiar presence. I knew what was coming as he leaned in and kissed me. I felt his love. I woke up suddenly, thinking he had truly made love to me and that the past year had all been a nightmare. Turning to where he should have been lying next to me, I found only an empty space. I rushed to the bathroom, hoping to find him there, but he wasn't. I frantically searched every room in our house, calling his name. It all came flooding back. The man I had loved for so long was gone, and I was the cause. Slowly, I dragged myself back to our empty bed. As I lay down, I held his pillow to my face to breathe in his scent. I longed to join him. I needed to be with him. I couldn't believe I had been unfaithful to David. He had been such a loving partner, passionate, gentle, and caring. Why had I refused him for so long? Why had I sought excitement with another man, hurting him in the process? I missed him so deeply and found myself searching for him every time I entered a room. I cried every day for David and for my profound loneliness. My home felt like an empty shell. It was just a house in a subdivision. My parents suggested I sell the house and move into a smaller apartment, but it was my last link to David. Memories of him filled every room. I could still hear him calling the kids in for dinner or cheering in front of our big screen TV when the Ohio State Buckeyes won. Frequently, I found myself talking to him or preparing 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, convinced he answered me. At times, I could even feel his presence near me. As our anniversary approached, I realized my parents were right. Selling the house was the best decision. I went to our family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, to discuss the sale, giving him my power of attorney in case it was needed. While I was there, I updated my will. Then I visited David's grave at Green Lawn Cemetery, as I did most days, and sat beside him, crying for hours. I shared my plans and told him how much I loved him, pleading for his forgiveness as I did every day. Before leaving the cemetery, a groundskeeper approached to inform me they would maintain the gravesite as I requested, since I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. Back home, I wrote a letter to my parents, thanking them for looking after my children, and included details of Mr. Harrison, who held the deed to the house and my will. Then I wrote letters to each of my children, expressing how much I loved them and regretted the pain I had caused. I would miss them terribly, but I needed to find my own path. My life felt empty, and I believed there was no future for me here. I placed the envelopes on our kitchen island where they would be easily found, each labeled with their names and accompanied by a family photo from happier times. I opened my eyes slowly, praying that he would be beside me, but he wasn't. It was our anniversary. I got out of bed and searched the house again, even noticing that our grandfather clock had stopped ticking. Returning to our master bedroom, I made the bed for the first time in months and rifled through my walk-in closet, wanting to look my best. I chose 2 outfits David had loved and laid them out on the bed, one for now and another for later. After that, I took a long shower in our master bathroom, letting the hot water cascade over me. I closed my eyes, trying to feel him near me, but he vanished when I opened them again. I turned off the shower, dried myself, and dressed in the outfit David liked best. I returned to the kitchen, leaving a short note on the island explaining where I could be found, not wanting anyone to worry about me. I mentioned that listing me as a missing person would be a waste of time. I was sure no one would notice my absence for weeks, not even my parents or my children. In fact, no one worried about me anymore. No phone calls, no visits, not even from my neighbors in our subdivision. Tears filled my eyes as I tried calling my children at my parents' house, wishing to hear their voices one last time before I left them. I was somewhat relieved when it went to voicemail. Hearing them might have made me change my mind. I walked through our house one last time, soaking in the memories that came flooding back to me. Each room held its own special moments. I could hear their laughter and remembered all the good times we had shared as a loving family over the years. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, soccer practices. After gathering what I needed, I got into David's Ford F-150, which I had kept parked in our garage since it was returned to me by the police. I drove to Alum Creek State Park one last time, crying as I made my way there. I felt so familiar with this place now, having visited it countless times over the past year. I would come here whenever I could, seeking solace in my treasured memories. I parked the truck exactly where David had been found, and our favorite CD was playing, songs by Keith Urban and Tim McGraw. I listened to the songs we loved most, reminiscing about the days when we would sing along together during our drives to the kids' games. I kept thinking of David, hoping he would be waiting for me so I could spend eternity with him. If he wasn't, then I would accept whatever consequences I had to face for my mistakes. As I drifted off to sleep with the gentle hum of the engine lulling me, I thought I heard David singing along with his favorite song. I opened my eyes and looked across to see him sitting next to me, smiling as he sang. He reached out his hand to me, and I took it, feeling his warmth for the first time in a year. I knew I wasn't dreaming this time. He moved closer and placed his hand on my cheek, just like he used to, and we embraced, feeling an overwhelming connection for the first time in so long. "Happy anniversary, David," I whispered. "I love you, and I've missed you so much." As our faces touched, we both cried, and I could feel our tears mingling. I held him tightly, knowing I would never let him go again. The next morning, my 4 children were full of energy at my parents' house in Dublin, with the youngest 2 bubbling with excitement. Their grandparents listened, trying to understand as the kids spoke over one another. After a few moments, they finally grasped what each child was saying. Their mother and father had come to visit them during the night. They shared the same story, expressing that their parents were happy and together, holding hands as they were always meant to be. Their grandmother turned pale and reached for her husband to steady herself. He struggled to remain composed and sat down heavily in his recliner, clearly shaken. They hurried the children to get ready for school, then raced to their daughter's house in Westerville. Using the spare key they kept, they let themselves in through the front door, repeatedly calling out for Sarah until they spotted the letters on the kitchen island. Praying silently for their daughter, they sat down at the breakfast table and picked up the open letter. It confirmed their greatest fears, and they understood where she had gone. Both of them started crying uncontrollably as they held each other tightly, recalling how harshly they had treated her since David's death, especially knowing about her struggles with depression and guilt. At that moment, they were finally crying for Sarah, but it was too late for her now. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.